last night was the best debate performance of any candidate running for the presidency or vice presidency, at least in a generation. JD Vance gave a remarkable performance, and I got to just say, as a side note to him, I appreciate he did not wear a crimson red tie. I actually liked the fact that he was not in a standard red tie. It was a little more purplish than red. You ladies will know the color better than me, but it wasn't one of those bright red typical ties with Tim Walz going the prototypical blue tie, blue suit sort of thing. I appreciated that, and he was a fantastic debater. So much so that the Democrats had to pivot after the debate immediately to, well, the vice presidential debates don't matter. And by the way, they're right on that. This debate is not going to move the needle one way or the other. But it was a compelling performance, and what it did is it made JD Vance the front runner for the Republican nomination if Trump loses. He was command of the facts and articulate. Whether I liked some of what he had to say or not, he did a fantastic job. And his opponents were, shrill, terrible schoolmarms. And then Tim Walz was a terrible debate moderator. CBS News discredited itself. I thought David Muir had a stick up his butt during that debate. What a smug, self-pretentious tool. But these two ladies last night, now, you got to be careful because you can say that stuff about David Muir and no one cares, but you say the same thing about them. Oh, you're sexist. You're sexist. No, they were horrible awfuls, affluent white female urban liberals, and that's what they catered the debate to. We learned more about their political bubble than we learned about the candidates based on the questions they asked. Iran literally launched over 200 missiles yesterday at Israel, and they did not ask a single question about it. JD Vance has been pretty firm in his opposition to continued funding of Ukraine. They didn't ask a single question about it. You know what they asked about? Climate change. They asked about abortion. Of course, they asked the January 6th question. But nope, the current breaking news, God forbid they ask relevant questions about current headlines. Nope. And then they promised they wouldn't fact check. And every time they ended, they had to have the last word. Listen, there is a negative stereotype of a certain woman, some call Karen, who has to have the last word. And these two women played to that stereotype. At the end, they wanted to fact check and editorialize, and they did it to both candidates. In fairness, they did it to both candidates. They just smug. Actually, scientists say, actually, this is the consensus. We don't want to hear from you. Shut up, ask the question. And I would apply that criticism to men or women, but you applied to them. They're like, oh, you're sexist for saying that. How dare you say that to me? No, you were a horrible moderator, Margaret Brennan. You are a horrible moderator, Norah O'Donnell. I really do want this in the record. Norah O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan, what you have processed as sexism today because people didn't like your moderating last night is your defensive mechanism to avoid grappling with the fact that you actually sucked as debate moderators. You were terrible debate moderators. You were preening. You were rude. We have so many questions and not enough time. We have to move on. We have to move on. But let me get the final word to editorialize and fact check in a way I promised I wouldn't do. It was rude and unprofessional. Can we not have national reporters do these debates anymore? Can you find somebody at a TV station in Atlanta, Georgia, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and put them in a room together, two swing states, and say, local guys, y'all aren't arrogant D-bags. Y'all do the questions. Y'all actually have the debate because these preening, pretentious, prattling idiots in Washington, D.C. and New York are too high on their own supply to do a decent debate anymore. They actually mistake their pretty faces on television for authority and expertise. They're just vapid dimwits. They're like Kamala Harris. It was ridiculous, and J.D. Vance held his own against all of it. That sort of fact-checking cut the microphone nonsense when he's having to explain to them immigration.
It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
I'm sorry, just to clarify for our audience, I got a fact check, which you promised you wouldn't do, but you just couldn't help it because you have confused your pretty face for a voice of authority when really you don't know much of anything, which JD Vance then had to point out to you as you tried to cut him off because you just had to be right, even though you were wrong.
Senator, we have so much to get to.
Oh, we have so much to get to.
We're going to turn now to the economy. Thank you.
Margaret, the rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check. And since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
We have so much to get to.
Since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
we want to have
One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut.
Because Margaret Brennan got it wrong and didn't like being corrected by the man. How sexist of him to point out to her that she was wrong. JD Vance ate these people alive and spit them out. It was actually kind of remarkable, including, I gotta give it to him, this part.
Pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on health care then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to.
We have a lot to get to. Again, we have a lot to get to. We have so little time and so much to get. They were horrible debate moderators. But Vance, like, Tim, poor guy, you got to play whack-a-mole with all of this stuff. It was great. He kept coming back time and time again, making it about Kamala Harris being there right now, constantly. In fact, it drove Nicole Wallace at MSNBC insane. Had a funny moment there. It was so funny. They just couldn't help themselves. JD Vance continually ran circles around them. And then Tim Walz, every time he opened his mouth, he just said something, y'all, he literally said this.
Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was the NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety.
I've become friends with school shooters. Tim Walz said that on stage. He also was completely ill-prepared for the question about Tiananmen. Turns out he lied. He wasn't there. They asked him in the most softball way possible and gave him a large pass without too much probing, and he still flubbed it.
We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17. Worked on family farm.
Okay, pause. Stop that. We got to go back. Hang on a second. Hang on. Roll the tape back. Let's get to Tim Walz. Listen to this again.
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400.
I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400.
Rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I
rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights came on.
That service,
And I'm proud of that. What the hell sort of service? I rode the street bike till the lights came on, and I'm proud of that service. What? What service were you offering by riding your street bike in small town Nebraska, Tim? Clearly nervous.
National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect, and I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota
You'll be unsurprised to note he's avoiding answering the question.
So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything. Many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques
now,
of this.
Kudos for Margaret Brennan jumping in here in just this moment to reiterate the actual question.
Xi Jinping about COVID, and I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this is I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just...
No, you did not. You said you were there, and we know that you were not there. You have now lied about your military service. You've lied about being in Tiananmen, and last night you said that your son was the witness to a shooting at a community center. I'd like to presume you're not lying about that, but I think I need some verification, sir, before I can actually go along with it. You want to know how ultimately this debate played out? This is an undecided voter in the state of Georgia.
We had a great economy with the person that I voted for,
who says there's very little the Harris campaign could do to scoop away his or his mother Sharon's vote for the man they've supported since 2016.
So he was like, I think I'm going to vote for Donald Trump, and you were like, honey, me too, and then you guys brought it in for a hug?
Honey, me too. This is my mom.
Yeah, way done. And it wasn't an undecided voter. They've been Trump supporters since 2016. Yeah, well done there, CBS, with your undecided voter focus group. A few people have been voting for Trump since 2016, and the mother calling the son honey. That's how well it went for CBS News and for Tim Walz. JD Vance mopped the floor with all of them. That is, we got more audio to play when we come back, and also some very candid thoughts some of you won't like. Welcome back. It is Erick Erickson here. I want to say something, and I'm going to be as plain speaking as I possibly can. The last Republican presidential candidate I supported in our primary was George W. Bush in 2000, who won. I vehemently opposed John McCain. When George W. Bush was president, I started criticizing him pretty regularly for his expansion of government with No Child Left Behind, Medicare Part D, so much so that as the editor-in-chief at Red State, the White House set up an account to regularly respond to me. I did the very first podcast interview Rush Limbaugh ever did. I had Rush on, and we had a conversation and got him to say that George W. Bush was a good Republican and fine president, but was not a conservative. Opposed Mitt Romney because he wasn't a conservative, and same with Donald Trump. The difference is that the McCain team, the Romney team, the Bush team, they could all take the criticism and understand I'm still going to vote for him, even as I criticize him. The Trump fans are super sensitive that if you criticize him at all, you're expressing some sort of disloyalty. I can vote for the man, but I'll say this. What JD Vance did on stage last night was a commanding performance, but also a complete rejection of the values of the Republican Party over the last 40 years and a complete ditching of conservatism. And for guys who are concerned about the size and scope of government, you've got to be concerned that JD Vance came out in favor of expert industrial policy controls from Washington, came out with expansion of government benefits, came out with expansion of government mandates on businesses. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the big winner at last night's debate because we had two New Deal Democrats on stage, one who's pro-choice and the other pro-life but willing to abandon it on the national stage. That's ultimately at the policy side of it. Vance had a brilliant performance, but this was not conservatism. And I fear what Trump and Vance do if they win is they grow government, and then the Democrats will eventually win again, and they'll weaponize it against us as opposed to shrinking government. When you start imposing mandates on businesses and you start having experts set industrial policy, when the Democrats become in control, they're going to put their experts in charge of it, and you're not going to like it. Better to get rid of it than to try to control it temporarily unless you're going to have a coup and overthrow the country. And they say they're not going to do that, and I take them at their word. It was a massive, both guys wound up agreeing a lot on expanding government. As a conservative who's a conservative because I'm a Christian and I believe we're all sinners, I want as few in charge of me as possible. And Vance and Walz instead argued over how much more power to give those sinners and just who should control them. And I have concerns with that. Now, we'll move on. First, let me tell you about the Eden Pure Thunder Store. You get 3 of them. You save $200. You get them for less than $200 at EdenPureDeals.com. They clean the air. They get rid of the dust. They get rid of the pollen. They get rid of the bacteria. They can even eliminate viruses with the new plasma ones. They're actually really cool. They also wipe out odors. They generate ozone. And in generating that ozone, the ozone locks onto the ions that cause smells and destroys those ions. So no smell can withstand it. Dirty diapers, pet odors, smoke odors, musty odors, the litter box, you name it. And you can get 3 of them, save $200. One upstairs, one downstairs, one in your basement, one in your travel bag. You can hold this thing in your hand. It's not big, and it just packs a wallop. You can even plug it up with a USB cord, like into my laptop. I've done that before. You go to EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is Erick3, ERICK3. That's the discount code, no space, the number, ERICK, the number 3, no space, EdenPureDeals.com, discount code Erick3. I want to go back to this point. It makes people very, very, very sensitive, and I do struggle to understand why. My theory is that despite being able to grab hold of the Republican Party in 2016 and hold it ever since, there's still this underlying, I don't want to say inferiority complex because it's not really that. It's this sensitivity that maybe they're not in as much control as they think. They haven't rooted out everyone. But I could criticize Bush, Romney, McCain, McConnell, you name it, and was never told that I was disloyal or clearly a closet Democrat or things like that. That they never worried. They understood where the criticism came from. But you criticize the Trump-Vance ticket, and you're immediately labeled disloyal. Apparently, it's now rhino to want the Republicans to actually be Republicans. So when Vance last night and Walz agreed on so much expansion of government programs, on so much expansion of government services, on so much expansion of government welfare programs, on so much expansion of government mandates on businesses, driving up the cost and the size and scope of government, I was like, wait a second, as somebody who actually cares about reining in government and the size and scope of government, I'm not hearing much that I like in this debate, even as I like Vance's performance. They're like, oh, I dare you, you've got to be voting for Kamala Harris. Like, no, I mean, it comes down to, like, she's still going to pick better judges, among other things. And, of course, Walz is totally discrediting himself on free speech and China and everything else. But can you not criticize your own side? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going to. I'm absolutely going. I'm not going to stop. It's just kind of wild, the level of, like, I mean, the Bush, Romney, McCain people, they didn't care. They felt sure of themselves and their position. And I think that's why Trump and his supporters are so ruthless when it comes to any dissent, is that they're really not sure of themselves and their position within the party, that at any moment it could be snatched away from them. They're in charge. I've given him money. I intend to vote for him. But at the same time, I'm like, this is going to end badly for us. When you expand the size and scope of government, the way JD Vance articulated last night, eventually the Democrats get back in charge and they weaponize it against us. And you're not going to be able to stop them unless you're going to get in office and then have a coup and overthrow the constitutional order, which we don't want to get into that. That was the one moment where JD Vance didn't handle himself well, I thought, on stage last night. But other than that, Vance just mopped the floor with Tim Walz, who his performance was so bad, Democrats skipped trying to defend him and just went to, well, it doesn't matter. This, again, another example.
She was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their health care decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals. They get early childhood education. They get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget, Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the...
By the way, Tim Walz, yet again, lying. That is actually what the law in Minnesota does. When Scott Jennings pointed it out on CNN last night, the Democrats had an absolute meltdown over it. I mean, it was like sticking their fingers in their ears and going, la, 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 la. They didn't want to hear it. It's actually true. In Minnesota, Tim Walz signed a law, and the law specifically says if a child is born alive after surviving an abortion, you do not have to give that child health care. So the child is alive, and you can let the doctor let the child die. That's the law in Minnesota, and Tim Walz didn't want to grapple with it. Neither did the Democrats on CNN last night. Now, listen, pro-life activists are very upset with JD Vance last night, and he did make it pretty clear that he has changed his mind on national abortion laws and that he really is okay with the states deciding there really shouldn't be national laws. And he pulled his punches on, for example, the Amber Thurman story. And pro-lifers very upset with him. Well, let me defend JD Vance here. I've had my criticisms on the New Deal stuff, but on the life stuff, I'm very committed to pro-life. I would love a national law that bans abortion. I wish he and Trump would be able to defend it, but they're on defense on this issue. And my suspicion is the campaign asked him to pull his punches. He's actually very articulate on the issue. My suspicion is that the campaign asked him to pull his punches and not dwell on it, in large part because this is the one thing that the Republicans pull badly on, particularly with women. So why dig your heels in on this issue and try to defend it when you can just move on? So I'm not really that worked up about it. I have some pro-life friends who are. I'm like, no, I'm kind of worked up about the wanting expanded government programs and mandates on businesses and stuff. Now, whether we vote for him or not is relevant. I don't like those policy positions. But on the life stuff, I got to think they're looking at their polling. They're trying to convince swing voting females to vote for them, and abortion is not a good one. But on the issue of the Springfield, Ohio stuff, this came up in the debate last night, and I thought that Vance handled it well.
Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You've got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Yeah, I mean, listen, time and time again, Vance was able to weave this back better than Trump did on stage during his debate with Harris about Harris being in office right now.
We're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer, a lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do. And some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies, and what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%, open the American southern border, and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now, not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans.
Yes, thank you, JD Vance. Time and time again, coming back to that. So much so, this is Abby Phillips after the debate was over. Within less than 10 minutes after the debate concludes, Abby Phillips on CNN, this with Tim Walz.
I mean, I think there was a clear lack of preparation and execution here on Walz's part.
I think actually it's the opposite. I think he had too much preparation.
Maybe, yeah.
He had so many lines that he was clearly trying to say that he didn't listen and said when JD Vance said one of the many, many things he really hit Kamala Harris on, not Tim Walz, but Kamala Harris, he didn't respond because he clearly had things in his mind. I think the lack of interviews that he has done with national media, with local media, it showed. He needed more reps.
Look, JD Vance, we knew going into this was a good debater. He went to Yale. He was polished. He was smooth. That Tim Walz, though, was as bad as he was is remarkable. If the Republicans lose in November, I know we'll go through it was stolen stuff, but if Republicans lose in November, they're going to have to ask themselves if for years they have said repeatedly that being Democrat light was not the way to beat Democrats because you can't beat the real thing. Maybe we need to go back to not being a lighter version of Democrats, but actually an alternative to Democrats. If the Democrats lose in November, there's going to be a lot of looking at Pennsylvania thinking, what if we had Josh Shapiro on that debate stage? What if we had Josh Shapiro? The reality is this: the vice presidential debate doesn't really matter. In a very tight election like this one was, maybe at the margins it does. But mostly it's not going to matter. Most Americans didn't watch it. By the time they got, reporters are actually attacking Norah O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan, not for their terrible moderation last night, but that they put the January 6th question towards the end by the time most people had tuned out, because that went in several focus groups, wound up hurting Trump and Vance. And several of the focus groups of independent voters, there were several in each who were really hung up on Vance's performance on that answer. But it doesn't matter. Vice presidential debates never matter. You know how I know vice presidential debates don't matter? They don't matter because Dan Quayle did not prevent George H.W. Bush from becoming president of the United States. And that is, I realize, history lesson there for a lot of people. But in 1988, George H.W. Bush ran with Dan Quayle. And Quayle was a senator from Indiana. To this day, people aren't really sure why on earth he picked Dan Quayle to be his running mate. but he did. And in so doing, he got Dan Quayle on a debate stage with Lloyd Benson. Let me see if I can find this for you here, because this is worth hearing. Lloyd Benson. So this is a defining moment of the 1998 vice presidential debate. It's the only thing to this day anybody remembers about the vice presidential debate. It was such a brutal beatdown of Dan Quayle. It's the only thing to this day when people think of Dan Quayle, that and his inability to spell potato, which wasn't really his fault. It's about the only thing people remember, and it was not fatal to George H.W. Bush becoming president of the United States.
We'll have day-to-day activities with all the people in government. And then, if that unfortunate situation happens, if that situation, which would be very tragic, happens, I will be prepared to carry out the responsibilities of the presidency of the United States of America. And I will be prepared to do that. I will be prepared not only because of my service in the Congress, but because of my ability to communicate and to lead. It is not just age, it's accomplishments, it's experience. I have far more experience than many others that sought the office of vice president of this country. I have as much experience in the Congress as Jack Kennedy did when he sought the presidency. I will be prepared to deal with the people in the Bush administration if that unfortunate event would ever occur.
Senator Benson.
Senator, I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
That kind of was the end of Dan Quayle ever being able to advance in American politics beyond one term as vice president of the United States. But it was not fatal to George H.W. Bush becoming president. Tim Walz's performance on the debate stage is not fatal to Kamala Harris becoming president of the United States. Kamala Harris is fatal to Kamala Harris becoming president of the United States. Old Glory Bank is my bank, and I would love for you guys to consider using Old Glory Bank as your bank. It's a fantastic bank. It's an online bank. They're not going to have a branch near you, but it's okay. They figured out how to make it very easy for you to deposit cash if you need to. You can use the mobile app to be able to deposit checks. You can get loans. You can get mortgages. You can, even though they're an online bank, you can establish a relationship with them, a working relationship, and build up a relationship with your banker at Old Glory Bank for loans and mortgages and questions. They have great tools online. They have great online bill pay features. And you're never going to get your bank canceled because you're conservative, because these are conservatives who started Old Glory Bank. It's oldglorybank.com, oldglorybank.com. You go there, it takes less than 6 minutes to fill out the form online, and you can get an account. I have a checking account with them. I have a savings account with them. You can get one for your kids, a custodial account. You can get one for yourself. It's a great bank. You will enjoy using Old Glory Bank. They stay out of your way. They stay here. They make banking life easy for you, even depositing cash at 88,000 retail locations around the country. oldglorybank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. It is my bank. It can be your bank too. oldglorybank.com. Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It's Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, this hour of the program is brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. Wherever you are nationwide, if you're in charge of the business of a business and you want it to grow, you need access to have equipment loans, loans for buying a franchise or buying out your business partner, things like that. Reach out to them, firstlibertyga.com, firstlibertyga.com. I got to play for you this clip from Nicole Wallace, who absolutely melted down on MSNBC over JD Vance's performance.
Good enough rebuttal?
JD Vance said, well, Donald Trump strengthened and saved Obamacare. That's what he came back and said.
Right.
It's the audacity. I agree with you that we're in year 9 and no one knows how to cover the audacity. Mm-hmm. The audacity is it someone should have said, stop it, stop. Are you effing kidding me? And they should have dropped that F-bomb, right? I mean, they should have just, this is a debate. This may be the only chance people have to see the difference. And instead, I mean, I'll go back to my toothpicks. JD Vance just put one little toothpick on top of the other and said, and I'm for this and I'm for this. And I'm so sorry those women died. They died because of Donald Trump.
She couldn't. Poor thing, having a psychotic break live on national television because JD Vance did better than Tim Walz. And y'all, it was like North Korean news at MSNBC today. They want to assure their audience Tim Walz was the brilliant, greatest debate performer ever. It was absolutely wild to watch. Absolutely wild. Okay. So I got about 30 seconds. We got people who want to chime in on the debate. I have had enough to say about this that I didn't have time to take phone calls. So those of you on the phones, if you're patient with me, when we come back, I will take your calls in the next segment, get your debate comments off your chest before I move on to other stuff. Real quick, though, my buddy Morgan House up in Gainesville, he ran his first Ironman in Chattanooga. He survived. I got to go up there and buy him a beer. Congratulations to him on his Ironman. And my dear listener, Karen, happy birthday. She and I were just trading emails. When we come back, Israel needs to bomb Iran. They really, really need to bomb Iran and do it quickly. I want to explain why, and I also want to take your phone calls, 877-973-7425. Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here across the United States of America. The phone number in which I will be going to phone calls here very quickly, 877-973-7425. Got a couple of folks I want to let chime in on the debate before I move into Israel. You do need to know there is some breaking news, which I'll get into the moment I get after these phone calls. Joe Biden saying he opposes Israel taking out Iran's nuclear capabilities, which is exactly what they need to do. I was stunned after more than 200 missiles from Iran were launched at Israel. We didn't get a single question on that yesterday. We didn't get a question on Ukraine. Particularly Vance has been strident on his position there. It was a great way to ask questions. They didn't do anything substantive on foreign policy. It was kind of wild that they didn't. They were so focused on the liberal causes of the day, climate change and abortion, that they couldn't ask questions that were relevant to the news of the day. Now, that gets me to the Iran situation. Joe Biden has decided he is against Israel taking out Iran's nuclear capabilities. Donald Trump actually weighed in on the nuclear chaos and the Iran-Israel situation. This is part of what he said.
The world right now is spiraling out of control. You might not have seen what's happened because it was a few hours ago. A lot of people were here. There's so many people outside, which we appreciate. But a lot of people were here a short time ago. Iran launched 181 ballistic missiles at Israel, and I've been talking about World War III for a long time, and I don't want to make predictions because the predictions always come true. We're not going to make, but they are very close to global catastrophe. We have a non-existent president and a non-existent vice president who should be in charge, but nobody knows what's going on. She was at a fundraiser in San Francisco, a city that she totally destroyed, by the way. San Francisco was the best city in the country maybe 20 years ago, and today you can't even go there. You can't even.
I mean, look, Trump making an irrelevant campaign issue let me explain to you why. And by the way, if you subscribe to my show notes, if you text data to 33777, subscribe to the show notes. Let me explain to you, first of all, the reason I say that if you clicked on my morning piece, one person died in Israel. One person died, a Palestinian man in Jericho. Kind of the walls of Jericho fell. I shouldn't laugh about this. This is horrible. The man is on a street corner, and a missile, a part of a missile, the tail of a missile, falls out of the sky and just smashes him on the ground like splat. It's like something out of Looney Tunes. And it was caught on closed-circuit television. And the clip, I didn't embed the clip in this morning's piece, but I linked to it that you can see it on social media. And literally, this man is standing on a street corner, and a rocket falls out of the sky on top of him. Doesn't blow up. It's already gone. It's the tail end of the missile falls on him. just plop, and he's gone, and part of him is over here and part of him is over there. It was horrible to realize. Like I told my son last night about this happening. It's like, I don't want you to watch it because this isn't CGI. This is literally a human being dying with a portion of a missile falling out of the sky, and it was wild. It was caught on closed circuit television. Let me explain to you why Israel needs to bomb Iran right now and why Joe Biden is wrong. We now know three things from Iran. One, Iran prefers to operate through proxy terrorist groups. Iran uses third parties for its bidding. This is Jake Tapper talking about the situation with Hezbollah.
Foreign policy. And so far, it's been very, very clear from Kamala Harris.
This is Dana Bash first,
that there's going to be on foreign
Jake Tapper.
policy almost no change.
Yeah.
She doesn't want. She's opening up some cracks of daylight in economic policy and some other policy, but not on foreign policy at all. And immigration. Yeah.
So it's interesting. So there obviously was an attempt by the Biden administration to engage with Iran, and it obviously hasn't worked. I mean, it just hasn't. I mean, I'm not saying that any policy with Iran has worked, because it really hasn't, but you do see that Iranian proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, other militias in Iraq and Syria have become emboldened. And there is a strong argument by Republicans against what's happened. Now, I mean, again, you could look at you could go back decades and try to find one policy that worked, and you won't find one.
That's true.
That's exactly it. And they are emboldened. Iran operates through these proxies. And in operating through these proxies, Iran doesn't have to do the heavy lifting. That's number one. Number two, Iran now has a ballistic missile capability. They launched 200 of them at Israel yesterday, and their ballistic missile capability can reach all of the capitals of all their enemies in the Middle East, all of whom are our allies. They can reach Abu Dhabi, they can reach Muscat, they can reach Dubai, they can reach Manama, they can reach Riyadh, they can reach Amman, they can probably reach Cairo, they can certainly reach Tel Aviv. We saw that live on television yesterday. So Iran likes to operate through its proxies. It has a ballistic missile capability to reach our allies if it need be. And three, it really wants nuclear capability. And they are, according to Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, probably within weeks of being able to produce a nuclear reaction. Within weeks, not months, not years, but weeks, according to him. Still much longer to put it into a bomb, but they're getting help from Russia and North Korea. We know that from intelligence. So Iran is not going to, we don't believe, launch a nuclear attack at Israel. There's a caveat there. We don't believe they're going to, but what they're going to do is they're going to tell the entire world, including us, you must allow our terror proxies to operate. And if you do not, then you get nuked. They essentially want to bully the world into allowing their terrorist regime to operate. And if you're unwilling to allow their terrorist regime to operate, then you're going to get a nuclear weapon sneaked into your country by Iran. We can't allow that to happen. We cannot allow Iran to legitimize its proxies through nuclear blackmail. And that is exactly what they're going to do. Now, I say caveat on Iran is not going to do that, except Bret Stephens in the New York Times today actually makes a pretty forceful case on why we do need to do something about Iran quickly. And he mentions Hassan Nasrallah. In a 2002 speech that was recorded, here's what Nasrallah said. The Jews will gather from all parts of the world into occupied Palestine, not in order to bring about the Antichrist and the end of the world, but rather that Allah, the glorified and most high, wants to save you from having to go to the ends of the world. For they have gathered in one place. They have gathered in one place, and there the final and decisive battle will take place. In other words, what Nasrallah believed and what the Iranian regime believes theologically is that God has allowed the Jews to all gather in Israel, and once they're all there, they can be wiped out in one place instead of having to go around the world hunting them. Anthony Blinken says Iran is within a couple of weeks, it says a week or two, of being able to produce enough weapons-grade uranium for a nuclear bomb. They're not going to use it directly, immediately. They're going to hold it over everyone's head. If you hurt Hezbollah, boom. If you hurt Hamas, boom. They have would-be assassins inside our country right now plotting the assassination of Donald Trump. And Joe Biden, the president of the United States, does not want Israel to touch Iran's nuclear capabilities. Here's the dirty little secret. Democrats really believe in détente. The Democrats believe if Iran has nukes and Israel has nukes, neither will do anything to the other. But the Democrats approach this from a secular atheist worldview where there is no God, there is no heaven, there is no hell, there is just now. The Iranians approach it from paradise theology. The Jews are all in one place. We vaporize them. They vaporize us. We go to heaven. They go to hell. The end times are here. That's the Iranian worldview. That's the Iranian leadership worldview, and we should distinguish between them and their people. Iran is perfectly happy to be nuclear vaporized so long as they get to vaporize the Jews, because that brings back the Mahdi, the end times, the end of the world, and paradise. And the Jews burn according to the Islamic paradise. These are not rational people, except through theocracy. And that Joe Biden and the Democrats assess all of this through a secular worldview that precludes the impact of a policy related to heaven and hell shows they're not capable of dealing with Iran. By the way, point to be made here, and I need every single person to pay attention to this. The fact that Joe Biden, President of the United States, thinks that Israel should not target Iran's nuclear capabilities, even when the Biden administration assesses Iran is within weeks of acquiring nuclear material, is another reason to vote for Donald Trump for President of the United States, who very forcefully yesterday said if he is president, Iran will be made to account for what it has done. If you want to stop Iran from becoming a nuclear power that is intent on bringing about the end times, there's only one candidate for president you can vote for, and his name is Donald Trump. Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, and I'm going to go down an educational rabbit hole with you because people in the commentariat on television and radio are making you stupid. And it is my job, it is my goal, it is my passion to make you smart. While keeping you company wherever you are, I want to make you smart if I can. We need to talk about Tim Walz's statement last night. He insisted you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Tim Walz last night took the most radical position ever stated by a presidential or vice presidential candidate on the First Amendment, essentially taking a very restrictionist position on the First Amendment, one we have not had in this country since World War I, that there is no basis under the First Amendment for hate speech or misinformation. There actually is. The Supreme Court has repeatedly said that hate speech is protected speech. But Walz goes back to this line, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. You need to understand where it comes from and why it's such a stupid thing to say. It was never actually law uttered by the Supreme Court. Let me give you the background here. In 1918, in Boutzer versus the United States, South Dakota farmers had threatened politicians in South Dakota saying, we will beat you at the polls if you support a draft. Why? Because the Wilson administration, Woodrow Wilson's administration, had agreed to keep Americans out of World War I. The situation began to change, and shortly after Wilson's reelection, I think it was 1916, if I remember the timeline right, but it was 1916, 1917, the end of World War I, the Americans begin to enter, and Woodrow Wilson orders a draft. Americans, particularly of German descent, were outraged. that the Americans would take a side in World War I. There was really no need to take a side. The war was beginning to wind down, but Woodrow Wilson decided it was America's time on the stage and he was going to do it. So Wilson ordered a draft and then amended the Espionage Act of the United States to prohibit anyone from arguing against the draft. It was a breach of free speech. But Wilson prosecuted anyone and everyone who dared to question him. Woodrow Wilson was all of the things Democrats say they hate about Donald Trump in a person who really used the powers of the presidency to advance racism and dictatorship. He rounded up people who criticized him. He funded a brigade of brown shirts who would go around the country harassing and beating up anyone who criticized him. He would arrest people for speaking out against him. He would do all the things the Democrats say Donald Trump would do, but Wilson was a Democrat, so they give him a pass. His heart was in the right place, you know. So in Balzer versus United States, the South Dakota farmers say they're gonna challenge any politician who supports the draft at the polls. Woodrow Wilson has them all arrested. They are prosecuted and they are convicted, and their case goes to the United States Supreme Court in 1918, Balzer versus United States. And the majority of the court, we know from the record, agreed that they should be convicted. But one man, Oliver Wendell Holmes, was outraged that the idea that anyone would say we're going to beat you at the polls was somehow was a crime, was too outrageous for him, and he drafted a blistering dissent. It was such a blistering dissent that the Chief Justice of the United States at the time set the case aside, and the Wilson administration decided to abandon the convictions and prosecutions of the farmers. While all of that was going on, a man named Charles Schenck was in the United States in 1917 actively discouraging men from the draft. He was a socialist and a pacifist and opposed to the war. And Schenck was insisting that men should oppose the draft, not sign up for the draft, tear up the paperwork, not do it. He and his cohorts were arrested. They were not arrested for violating speech. They were arrested under the Espionage Act. And in 1919, the United States Supreme Court ruled that it was a crime under the Espionage Act to speak out against the draft. Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote the unanimous decision. And in that decision, uttered a phrase that is to this day uttered by people who have no idea what they're talking about. He wrote, "The most stringent protection of free speech would not protect a man in falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic. The question in every case is whether the words used are used in such circumstances and are of such a nature as to create a clear and present danger that they will bring about the substantive evils that Congress has a right to prevent. It is a question of proximity and degree." You will note a couple of things. One, it's not shouted fire in a crowded theater. That's not actually the phrase. It is falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic. But that was dicta. Dicta is an authoritative statement of an opinion, but it's not binding. It's not in the law. Schenck went to jail, though. Shortly thereafter, free speech advocates started denouncing Oliver Wendell Holmes, who was a man of great ego, cared about his ego, and began to listen to the free speech advocates. And then 2 years later, wrote a dissent in Abrams versus the United States, a similarly situated case, where he said, actually people should have the right to speak out against government policies they disagree with. And that ultimately led to the Supreme Court beginning to change its mind. And in 1969, the United States Supreme Court issued Brandenburg versus Ohio, 1969. The court held the government cannot punish inflammatory speech unless the speech is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action. It was striking down an Ohio criminal statute because the statute prohibited the advocacy of violence. In other words, what the Supreme Court was saying is that it is acceptable to advocate violence. Bradenberg was a Ku Klux Klan leader in Ohio. He contacted a reporter at a Cincinnati television station and invited him to cover a Klan rally in Hamilton County in 1964. One of the speeches made references to the possibility of revenge against blacks, except they used the N-word, Jews, and those who supported them, and claimed the president, the Congress, and the Supreme Court continue to suppress the white Caucasian race. Another speech advocated for the expulsion of blacks to Africa and Jews to Israel. He was arrested and charged with advocating violence. And the Supreme Court said Mr. Bradenberg, Clarence Bradenberg, is perfectly allowed to advocate for violence so long as he doesn't commit it. In other words, he could yell fire in the theater. In fact, today, I don't encourage you to do this. You can go to your local theater and you can yell fire, and it's perfectly legal for you to do this. However, if you go into a theater full of people and you yell fire and it incites a riot and people storm out, you're not going to be charged with yelling fire in a theater. You're going to be charged with provoking a riot. You're going to be charged with provoking mass chaos. You're going to be charged with that. That has nothing to do with your speech. But people use you can't yell fire in a crowded theater in a way to say that you can't, your speech can be restricted. No, you are perfectly allowed to yell fire. In fact, you can right now, wherever you are, if you're by yourself, yell fire and you're not going to jail. You can walk down the hallway of your office right now and say fire, 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 fire. You're not going to go to jail. People are going to look at you a little weird, but you're not going to go to jail. Yelling fire in a crowded theater, Oliver Wendell Holmes said nothing about a crowded theater, just a theater. And his point was that if you cause, and by the way, this was something that happened in the early 1900s. Pranksters actually did this. And in one particular case, a prankster panicked people. They started a stampede. 23 people were injured, 6 people killed. It was a thing in the early goings of theater in the United States. But it's not about speech. There's nothing to do with your speech. It has to do with if you take actions that cause a stampede or you name it, you can be held responsible for your actions. But if you want to stand up in the town square and say you think that this race of people need to be sent to wherever, all Haitians need to go back to Haiti, you're perfectly allowed to say that. If you want to stand up and scream at the top of your lungs the N-word, you might lose your job because the First Amendment does not apply to your employer, but the government's not going to throw you in jail. If you wish to stand up and offer a soliloquy on the earth being flat because you cannot see the curvature of the horizon, when you get in a plane, you fly from point A to point B. The world does not look round to you even from the height of a plane. The world must be flat. There's no evidence. Even the pictures from space show a flat planet. You may be stupid and you may be peddling misinformation, but it's perfectly legal. The American news media on a regular basis pushes misinformation and disinformation. They claim to be arbiters of truth, and oftentimes they're the ones who seed the lies. It's not against the law. If you hear someone saying you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, they don't know what they're talking about when it comes to speech. Tim Walz on a debate stage last night uttered the line. What's so hilariously sad to me, though, are the number of progressives who are lawyers who rushed to defend him to say, yes, this is the case. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. And so, yes, misinformation and hate speech are not protected under federal law. These people are clueless. They don't know what they're talking about. They're so busy trying to hump Tim Walz's leg. They themselves are the ones who are proverbially yelling fire in the crowded theater. They're the ones lying. They're the ones seeding misinformation and disinformation, and they can't even help themselves. At least know the truth, please. The phrase, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, does not even come from binding Supreme Court case law. It was a throwaway phrase by Oliver Wendell Holmes in a case in 1919 that the Supreme Court expressly overruled in 1969. And even when written in the case in 1919, it was not part of the legal decision. It was just an opinion offered by Oliver Wendell Holmes, and it was not meant to be you can't say it, but meant to be that if it were to spark a riot, you might be charged with sparking a riot, but you cannot actually be charged with yelling fire in a crowded theater. You're charged with starting a riot. Please be smarter than these legal commentators. And please, it's not hard to do. Please, I just beg you, be smarter than Tim Walz, who, God help us, at one point educated our children in public schools. Another reason to support school choice. Americans for Prosperity support school choice, and they'd love to have you on their team fighting for school choice around the country. They advance common sense conservative solutions to the problems that face us today, from securing the border to improving our schools with school choice. All you got to do is go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer today. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. You sign up with them. They can teach you how to be a door knocker, to teach you how to go door to door and help get people engaged in the electoral process. They can teach you how to go to your state government or local government and advocate for school choice and common sense conservative solutions for families and small businesses. They want you involved. They've got chapters in just about every state. You can be a part of yours, and if there's not a chapter there, you might be able to help them start one. If you're committed to conservatism and you want to advocate for it and advance it, go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer today. Sign up with AFP. They're the nation's leading largest grassroots organization. They happen to be on our side. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Sign up with AFP today. Become an activist and a warrior for free markets and free people, for common sense conservative solutions.
When the world seems crazy, he'll keep you sane. It's the Erick Erickson Show.
I actually really need your attention for this, and I need you to pay attention. Video started circulating on Instagram yesterday from a man with the Florida reserves. He's in North Carolina helping rescue people. And he was making a point about bureaucratic infighting slowing down the rescue of people, and some decided to twist it into the Biden administration wants people to die. I'm yet again disturbed at the number of people who are committed to pushing lies based on people's biases towards the other side politically so that they might believe the worst about them. Given the choice between maliciousness and incompetence, please always go with incompetence. No one wants the people of North Carolina to die. In fact, given that it is a swing state, Joe Biden has every incentive to pour every resource imaginable into it to show he's capable of helping, to help Kamala Harris. Joe Biden is doing a flyby of North Carolina today to inspect the damage from the air. They have asked him. This is not a moment to attack the president. The state of North Carolina, local officials have pleaded with Joe Biden, please do not land. There is only one road in and out of Asheville, North Carolina. It is the road that runs from the airport to Asheville, North Carolina. And should you land in Asheville, North Carolina, because of the security protocols of dealing with the President of the United States, they will have to shut down the only way in and out of Asheville, North Carolina. So please, Mr. President, do not come. Asheville, North Carolina looks like a war zone. And some businessmen there are saying, you know what, we're out, we're done. There's a bureaucratic infighting taking place, and this goes back to that Instagram video. Man, I can't play it. There's a lot of profanity. He's very frustrated, and it would just be like beep, 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 beep the whole way through. So not worth it to play the audio. But it is a disaster. There are people trapped on mountains. My wife and I know someone we used to go to church with. She was in just north of Asheville, I think near Brevard, and had to be rescued off a mountaintop by helicopter by the Army Reserves. She and a group of women. They were on a mountaintop. They were in a cabin. They were at a retreat, and the roads going up the mountain were washed away. There was no way off the mountain, and there were too many trees down. Had to be rescued by helicopter. What's happening is a lot of Americans have decided that they can help because they have helicopters. And they're willing to go to North Carolina and use their helicopters to help. And the bureaucrats have decided, well, what if we have so many helicopters in the air that they collide with each other? We can't have that. So we better tell people you're not allowed to bring your private helicopters, as opposed to, helicopter pilots, they live in crowded space, they know how to see out the window, and they can avoid hitting each other. The other issue is the bureaucrats are thinking, well, they don't really know how to rescue, so what if they start to hover and land and then somebody's going to rescue them? Maybe let them take their chances. The bureaucrats are making it impossible. In Greenville, South Carolina, a lady went to a store in Greenville, South Carolina, an elderly lady, to fill up a propane tank. And the local grocery store, or the local hardware store rather, would not allow her to fill up the tank because the tank's sticker had expired. I didn't know this until I started refilling propane tanks. If you can't get a new one, you can refill one, and they've got a sticker on them, and the sticker date is expired. They won't fill it up. Multiple people in line to get their propane tanks filled up asked the hardware store to please fill up this woman's propane tank. She clearly needs it, and they have no propane tanks to give her or sell to her. So fill it up. And the man said, I can't, because if I do, and the state of South Carolina finds out about it, we'll lose our ability to dispense propane for 6 months. So he didn't do it. In the middle of a hurricane, they're not willing to waive those regulations. The bureaucrats willing to shut him down for these sorts of things, to be very law and order about these things, to give no discretion. Heavy-handed bureaucrats are a danger at all times, particularly in natural disaster. This is a terrible situation. The death toll is going to go up. There are people in North Carolina who are trapped in the mountains with no way out. They will run out of water. They will run out of food. They will die. They will get desperate, some of them, and try to go off the mountains themselves to their peril. And the bureaucrats are so worried about the helicopter pilots possibly injuring each other or others that they would rather these people starve to death and die than to take the chance that maybe a civilian helicopter pilot who regularly flies helicopters might be able to land in a clearing and get someone on the helicopter and get them off the mountaintop. Rather they die on the mountain than risk dying in the civilian helicopter. Really, that's kind of where we are at this point. The local officials in certain counties, local sheriff's departments, in fact, have instructed, and this is what the man on Instagram was venting about, telling them that, no, the state government says you're not allowed to do this. Turns out the state government in North Carolina is perfectly happy to have the civilians helping. What's notable is that the helicopters at Fort Bragg have not been commissioned into the rescue effort yet. According to several North Carolina congressmen, they're begging Joe Biden to order the Army to assist in the rescue. This isn't posse comitatus. It's not law enforcement. It's a rescue operation in the United States. Allow the American military at Fort Bragg to participate. The bureaucrats are getting in the way of saving people's lives. This is what happened in Katrina. And it takes a very strong governor like Ron DeSantis to crack heads, skulls, and get people working together. If you are willing to help, we have long time partnered with the Salvation Army, and they have boots on the ground in North Carolina. They're feeding people. They're cutting trees down. They're doing everything they can. There's some great nonprofits up there. Samaritan's Purse is helping others. We've always partnered with the Salvation Army. I've gotten a lot of requests from, actually several of my advertisers reached out and said, would you partner with us? And I've had to say, no, we've got this arrangement with the Salvation Army, and I'm happy to work with the Salvation Army. But there are so many great opportunities out there to donate. But if you text the word donate to 33777, I'll send you a link to the Salvation Army's Hurricane Helene portal to donate. Because remember, we're focusing on North Carolina right now because there are a lot of people trapped in North Carolina. But this disaster is in Georgia, it's in South Carolina, it's in Tennessee, it's in Virginia, it's in Florida. Florida has a great ground operation because they deal with hurricanes pretty regularly. Georgia is okay. The Georgia Power and the EMCs are getting the power back on. Augusta, Georgia is in serious need. In fact, my local church here in Middle Georgia is doing a relief convoy over to Augusta, Georgia, because people are running out of bottled water and tarps and supplies. And the roads are, in some cases, only just passable, so they're behind on supply deliveries. But North Carolina is absolutely the focus. In North Carolina right now, there are people on mountains who cannot get off of the mountains. There are people in towns, and all of the roads into the towns no longer exist, so they can't leave the towns. And there are bureaucrats who are so concerned with making sure the regulations are followed that they're hampering and hindering relief efforts in turf wars over which agency is in charge. And everybody means well. There's no maliciousness here. Everyone means well. Everyone's trying to do their job, and the problem is they're stepping on each other, and they're hiding behind regulation instead of using their common sense. Because at the end of the day, bureaucracy becomes incompetent. There's not maliciousness here. There's incompetence. And the incompetence comes out in a bureaucratic turf war where each agency decides it wants to be in control. Right now, God's in control. Y'all need to get these helicopters in the air and let them out there. And if the President of the United States can do so, order the American military at Fort Bragg and elsewhere to get out there and start helping people. We've got pilots in the military who can do this. Florida has sent its Air National Guard and others up there to help. Other states have sent their National Guard to help. They are moving as quickly as they can up these mountains, but there are some people in rural areas where they're literally having to fly planes and helicopters and look for smoke signals or SOS. Literally, smoke signals are SOS as best they can. But, you know, the mountains in the east are different from the mountains in the west. The high Rockies don't have big tree coverage. In the east and the Appalachia, a lot of those mountains are covered in trees. It makes rescue more difficult. It makes seeing people in distress more difficult. But there needs to be help. People got to put aside their egos. And Joe Biden needs to lead. And this is part of the problem with the President of the United States right now is he's not fit to lead. He's not fit to marshal the resources of the government. He's not fit to be the moral, authoritative voice demanding quick action because he can't do that. He is physically, mentally incapable of doing that. And yet the Democrats won't invoke the 25th Amendment. They won't push him aside. They won't elevate Kamala Harris. They probably should. It'd probably help her politically too. But they won't do it. And we need the president. We need Roy Cooper, the governor of North Carolina, to make it very clear that anyone who can help, please come help. And do the help you can. What do you got to lose? A life on a mountainside if we don't have enough people in North Carolina helping. I just go back to the media's treatment of George W. Bush with Katrina. And all I can think is, you know, if this was Donald Trump and not Joe Biden, the media would be more assertive and more aggressive. But because it's Joe Biden and this is a swing state, so much of the media wants to do no harm. They covered for Joe Biden for as long as they could, and now they'll cover up as much as they can the disaster in North Carolina, the bureaucratic incompetence, because God forbid it spill over into a backlash against Kamala Harris. People's lives are on the line. Get those helicopters in the air. Save as many people as you can. It's what we need. If you can help, text the word donate to 33777. I'll send you back a link to the Salvation Army. Every dollar, there's no overhead cost here. Every dollar is going to go to relief for Hurricane Katrina. Text the word donate to 33777. People are really in need right now. Shelters are running out of food and water. They're overwhelmed with people. They underestimated the amount of people, the amount of destruction up there. The National Weather Service models had that storm moving further to the west. It hit them unexpected. The shelters are overwhelmed. People are shell-shocked. They feel like they've been through a war zone, many of them stuck. If you can text donate to 33777, I'll send you back the Salvation Army link, and dollar for dollar, that money will go to a great cause of helping the people in these states, particularly in North Carolina right now, who are still stuck and in need of help. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here across the United States of America. One of the things that JD Vance did so great in last night's debate is he kept bringing it back to Kamala Harris. Over and over and over again, he would bring it back to Kamala Harris. This is just another great example.
To be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill. She'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules. And it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up.
Time and time again, he just kept bringing it back to Kamala Harris. Time and time again. And it's got to have an impact. But again, this is a vice presidential debate in a very tight election. It can move some people at the margins. Maybe I'm just not sure that it's as impactful. And I've had people email me and say, well, what about Sarah Palin, the media? Yeah, they can define the vice presidents in these debates, and they can poke fun at them. But when people go vote, they were voting for Barack Obama versus John McCain, Barack Obama versus Mitt Romney, Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump, Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. They're not voting for JD Vance. They're not voting for Tim Walz. Vance has a highly negative opinion rating right now, and he came across very likable on the debate stage last night. In fact, much of the media was grumbling. I can't believe he's so two-faced. He came across as so likable. That's not him. How dare he come across as such a likable person on stage? They just couldn't help this. They were so upset about Tim Walz just blowing it on the debate stage. And Walz's answer, even with a friendly moderator, Walz's answer about Tiananmen Square was just so bad. He's just not good at this stuff. Also sheltered from the press. More on that when we come back. Right now, Vision Computers could really help you if you've got computer troubles. If you call them at 404-COMPUTE or go to visioncomputers.com, they can actually be your tech support solution for your office, for your company, for yourself. If you're an independent contractor, you need someone to help with your computers and make sure you're always up and running, call them at 404-COMPUTE for $179 a year, not a month, but a year. They can be your tech support solution. Not only that, but they can build you computers that are going to last. They work with you on what you actually need and want, so you're not upgrading all the time. So much better costs as well than the one-size-fits-all at the big box store. Go to visioncomputers.com. They're your hands-on support solution. They build you the computer. 404 Compute. If you call them and tell them I sent you, say Erick sent me, you're going to get an even better deal. 404 Compute or visioncomputers.com. They'll keep you up and running. They'll be your tech support solution. They'll build you a great machine if you need one. 404 Compute or visioncomputers.com. Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It's Erick Erickson here. Let me just step back at a higher altitude level and survey the landscape right now on Tim Walz's performance last night in that debate. It was bad enough that a lot of Democrats have moved on to it's not going to matter. And they're probably right that it's not going to matter. I think the top line matters the most, Trump versus Harris, and all of the data points to a Trump victory, and I can't emphasize that enough. There are so many Democrats who are convinced Donald Trump can't win. The underlying data suggests that he will. Let me just review for you some of the data here. Let me pull it back up. I just had it loaded a minute ago. Let me pull this up here because you've got to be able to understand where the data actually is right now, and courtesy John Ellis on compiling a lot of this stuff. Right now, 60% of Americans believe the nation is headed on the wrong track. 65% of registered voters believe the nation is in the wrong track. Nearly all Gallup measures that have shown some relationship to past presidential election outcomes or speak to current perceptions of the candidates favor the GOP right now. Nearly identical percentages of Americans rate Donald Trump and Kamala Harris favorably. Donald Trump actually is slightly viewed as more favorable than Kamala Harris. Yes, I know. 60% of independents have an unfavorable opinion of Kamala Harris. Voters across the Sun Belt states, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, they say Donald Trump improved their lives when he was president. They're not sure that Kamala Harris could. As immigration has grown in this country, the number of people who want mass deportations has surged. 55% of Americans for the first time in years want less immigration. Last year, over 70,000 Americans died from fentanyl and synthetic opioids. 40% of Americans know someone who has died, and Americans tie this to the border crisis and to the Biden administration. 86% of Republicans and 58% of Democrats strongly support mass deportation of undocumented immigrants. Latino voters are moving towards the GOP. A survey of 1,000 Latino registered voters found Harris leads Trump 54-40. Joe Biden led Trump 36 points. Harris and Trump are tied in Pennsylvania. Harris has a narrow lead against Donald Trump, but most Pennsylvania voters believe Donald Trump can handle the economy better than Kamala Harris, and it's their number one issue. Pennsylvania has more registered Democrats than Republicans, but the split has narrowed to a 44-40 split. Republicans added 12,600 more people to their list of registered voters. Democrats only added 8,000. All of this data suggests that Donald Trump should win the election. There is corollary data, however, you do have to know about. And the corollary data is people don't trust Donald Trump. They don't like Donald Trump. People believe Donald Trump, if he got into office, would not want to leave office. People believe Donald Trump organized an insurrection against the United States government, and people believe Donald Trump is a liar. People are more likely to find they have a positive impression of Kamala Harris's ability to not stress them out. That means that most Americans believe that Donald Trump will give them stress and anxiety, and Kamala Harris won't, even as they may not care for the job she does. Kamala Harris wins on emotion. Donald Trump wins on policy. The question when people go vote is, are they making an emotional appeal or a policy appeal? The problem gets back to Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, both of them. And that problem, very straightforward, is this. They've been so sheltered from the press that when they are confronted by the press, they make mistakes. And in the narrow margins of an election only 30 some odd days away, those mistakes can add up. Multiple reporters commented after that debate last night that Tim Walz's biggest problem is he's never been confronted by aggressive questioners. And a number of them, including Jake Tapper and Dana Bash at CNN, pointed out that Kamala Harris has really been fairly guarded from aggressive questioners as well. Kamala Harris did one interview with Dana Bash. She was asked some probative questions. Every other interview that Kamala Harris has done has been with a known supporter. Tim Walz last night, his question on Tiananmen Square was a question that he should have been prepared for in some way. And instead, he stammered and stumbled. Now, I played it earlier, but I want to go back to this. Let me see if I can find it here. I had a lot of video clips, and for the record, Charlie, I've played them. Let me get to this first. This is David Axelrod, Democratic consultant, making the point about the media.
They became the nominees because that's how people get to know you. And they haven't really spent a lot of time with either of them before now. So I also think that it may be a little bit of a problem for Walz, having not done this. You know, sitting with you guys is good prep for debates. It's good batting practice for these events. Walz has not been doing it. So I do question that. I mean, you're right. He was all over before he became the nominee, when he was campaigning for vice president. That's when he turned the word weird into kind of a thing for a while on one of those interviews. So it's bewildering to me why he hasn't been out there more. And I think that Harris, too, could benefit from just being out there more.
Yes, they can benefit from being out there before. This is the Tiananmen Square one. I want to listen to this. This is an extended clip, but it's worth hearing the whole part. His answer, his stumbling, his stuttering, Margaret Brennan trying to re-engage him a second time. JD Vance never even has to say anything. It's so discrediting his answer.
We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect, and I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything. Many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID, and I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community, and then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Those democracy protests, Tiananmen Square, happened, June 3rd or 4th? Tiananmen Square massacre, 1989. It happened from April to June. June 4th, 1989. I knew it was like June 3rd or 4th because it was around my birthday, which is June 3rd, that it happened. And he said he was there. I mean, that's the very last part of this.
So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests.
But he wasn't. He wasn't. The democracy protests started on April 15th. They ended with the massacre on June 4th. He did not arrive in Hong Kong until August. He lied on that debate stage last night. He lied. He's lied about his military service. He's lied about Minnesota's abortion law. He's lied about being in Hong Kong. He's a serial liar, pathological at this point. And he handled himself terribly. This gets to David Axelrod's point and my point as well, that candidates cannot be guarded. They need to be out there doing interviews. When I ran candidates for Congress, putting them in front of reporters on a regular basis was part of the job. You schedule time for them to go in counties. You know, most counties in this country still have small countywide newspapers. And you'd send them there and let those reporters ask them questions. You'd send them to the Farm Bureau and let the Farm Bureau ask them questions. You'd send them to local groups and have questions, and not necessarily friendly groups. You sent them to groups that were curious, groups that were interested, groups that weren't hostile, but not necessarily friends, because they could ask the tough questions. And in asking the tough questions, it shaped the candidate and helped the candidate refine their answers. And Walz and Harris are not doing that. Say what you will about Donald Trump and JD Vance. The two of them are out there doing interviews constantly. Donald Trump will sit down with basically anyone other than 60 Minutes, and who can blame him? He will sit down with people and he will be asked tough questions, and JD Vance will be asked tough questions. And it has made JD Vance far better than Tim Walz. It has made JD Vance far better than Kamala Harris. These candidates need to be on the ground, and they need to be in front of reporters, and they need to be asked questions, and that they're not is their own fault. It is the Democrats themselves who did Tim Walz a disservice by sheltering him from people willing to ask questions. He has not done very many interviews at all on his own without Kamala Harris there to hold his hand, and it showed on stage last night, and that helped Donald Trump. And that's why the Democrats are having to rush out today and say, well, it doesn't matter, doesn't matter, doesn't matter. I agree it tends not to matter, but we're talking about a 50-50 race right now. It is a tied race even in the battlegrounds. So if even like 3% of people were persuaded, that's going to matter in a tied race. With the economic turmoil we've got out there right now as well, the government is running the secret war on cash. They're trying to track how you spend your money. And as people have decided, they can't track me with cash, the government's come up with creative ways to do that. Swiss America has been the trusted leader in precious metals for 40 years. They've been warning people about the secret war on cash. If you're interested in safeguarding your hard-earned assets, you need to get their report about the secret war on cash. It's completely free. And they are rated A+ by the Better Business Bureau. They can educate you on protecting your assets in their report, The Secret War on Cash. It takes less than 15 minutes to read. It can save on your retirement and your finances. And all you have to do to get this free report is use my name, Erick. When you call or text 800-289-2646, 800-289-2646. The All Out War on Cash includes digital forms of currency. It's spreading daily. It's growing. So read the Secret War on Cash report. It is completely free. Just mention Erick, E-R-I-C-K, when you call or text 800-289-2646. That's 800-289-2646. Text Erick, E-R-I-C-K, 800-289-2646. Message and data rates may apply. Welcome back. It is Erick Erickson here across the United States of America. Doug Emhoff is Kamala Harris's husband. Jen Psaki at MSNBC, propagandist for the Biden administration, has praised him for his redefinition of masculinity, softer masculinity. Doug Emhoff got the nanny pregnant and probably paid for an abortion. He's muddied his answer on that, but that appears to be the case. When he had cheated on his first wife, gets the adulteress pregnant, pays for the abortion. They get a divorce. He allegedly struck a girlfriend in the face while waiting in a valet line one night in France. Who among us? This is from the Daily Mail. The woman was hit across the face, called him immediately after the incident, sobbing in her cab, and described the alleged assault to the friend. The Daily Mail will not name the woman, who's a successful New York attorney. The second friend said that the woman had been dating Emhoff for 3 months, was told about the violence at the time. A third friend said that Jane first told her in 2014 that she dated Emhoff and recounted the full story of his alleged abuse in 2018, when then Senator Harris was in the news after grilling Brett Kavanaugh over sexual assault allegations. The friends, who all asked not to be named for fear of retaliation by Emhoff, shared with Daily Mail pictures of him and the woman together from 2012 and other documents and communications corroborating elements of the story. The claims follow revelations that Emhoff cheated on his first wife and mother of his 2 kids in 2008, impregnating the nanny. So he's admitted to the affair with the nanny. We don't know what happened to the kid. We presume paid for an abortion. The second gentleman allegedly confessed to the woman he hit that he paid Naylor, the person he got pregnant, $80,000, and she signed a non-disclosure agreement. Yeah, really reshaping the perception of masculinity. Isn't that right, Jen Psaki? Really. This again, by the way, just a side note here. Abortion protects men. You get a girl pregnant, you bully her into an abortion. There are a whole lot of men in Hollywood who have done that. It appears the second gentleman of the United States might be one of those men. Abortion's not liberating. It captures you to the whims of the man. Beyond that, we have a second gentleman of the United States, a man who the left is praising for his new soft masculinity. What is that new soft masculinity? He had an affair, impregnated the nanny, paid her a bunch of money to keep her mouth shut, and then hit his girlfriend. You want to make him the first gentleman of the United States. Okay. I wonder if the media will speak about this. You know they would if it was a Republican. You absolutely know they would if it was a Republican. But it's a Democrat. It's Kamala Harris's husband. The Daily Mail will run the story. Will the media cover it? Probably not. But your chance putting in as first gentleman of the United States a man who had an affair, impregnated the nanny, and then hit his girlfriend. Real classing up the joint. Absolutely. Talk about the return of norms.